Let's go ahead and make a structure to hold all our variables for our inventory items. So let's go into Content, Blueprints, and let's make a new folder called Structs. Open it up, and let's make a new struct. So right-click, Blueprints, Structure, and we will call it S for struct item data. So we can open it up. And this will hold all our variables for the data that our inventory items will have. So the first one is the name of the item. So we'll call it item name, and it'll be of type name. We also need an item icon, and we'll call it icon. And this will be of type texture 2D. Texture 2D, object reference. And that's all we need for now. We'll add some more later, but that's everything we need in this moment. So let's go to our inventory slot, and let's add this as a variable. So in our graph, create a variable, and we'll call it S item data, and it will be of type item S item data. We could just call it item data without the S. Compile and save. So now you can see we have the ability to add a name and an icon. We also want to add another variable, and this will be amount, and it'll be the amount of the item that we have in this slot, and it'll be an integer. So compile and save. We are going to make our inventory in another blueprint component. So in our blueprints folder, blueprint component, we can add another one. So I'm going to right click, blueprint class, and actor component. And we will call this BPC inventory. And we'll attach this to our character later. So back into blueprints, let's go into actors now, and let's make a new folder, and we're going to call this inventory. And we need to create an actor, and it will be called BP inventory item master. So we need an actor for all our inventory items. So let's open that. And this one needs the variable as well of our S item data. So let's go into variables and create it, and we'll just call it item data, and it'll be of type S item data. Now to demonstrate this, let's make an actual item. This is just the master item, which controls overall code that we need for all the children. But let's make a child now. So right click, create child blueprint class, and we'll replace the master with flashlight battery, which will be one of our inventory items. So open it up, and what we can do is here in this item data, now this is where we want to change the name and the icon. So let's change the name to flashlight battery, and we can choose the icon to we'll just have to choose something temporary for now. Let's go ahead and choose this green face here. I usually use his face when I need temporary icons, just for fun. So let's see if we can add this to our inventory in-game. First, we need our inventory to know what items it has and how many of each. So we need yet another structure called, let's go into structures, blueprints structure, and we'll call it S inventory items. And in here we'll need two variables. The first one is our inventory items master. So let's make it BP in inventory item master, and it'll be a class reference. And the second is amount. So we'll call it amount, and this will be an integer. Let's call the first one item. I know we're adding a lot of things at once, but I hope it'll all start to clear up soon as you start to understand the function of each one. So back in our BPC, so blueprint component BPC inventory, this is where we need to keep track of what items we have and how much of each with the structure we just created. So let's create a variable. We'll call it inventory slots, and it will be of type S inventory items, which is the structure we just created. And as you can see here, we don't want to set it to anything yet, but we can choose either the master or all the children. Right now we just have the one flashlight battery, and we can set how much we have of each. We want to make it an array so that we can have multiple of each one. So let's see, I can have one of the flashlight battery, and then if there was a second one, we can make it that, and this one has 10, and this one has 2, etc., etc. But let's press the little trash icon there to reset it to 0. So in the begin play, we need to let this know that it should actually have 8 slots. They'll all be empty, but it needs 8 of them. And the reason we're going to do it here instead of just hitting this 8 times is because we want this to dynamically be able to change if we decide to go into our player controller and change how many slots we have. We don't want to have to remember to go in there and then also come here and add more. So in the begin play, let's get our inventory slots, and we're going to get a node called resize. And for the number, we just have to get our player controller, cast to our HG player controller, convert it to a pure cast, get the inventory slots, and set it to that number. Cool. So now our inventory slots variable has the same number of slots we have in our game, and they're all empty. So first off, we want to give us the ability to add an item to our slot. And we'll do that with a function, and we'll call this add item. And we'll give it 2 inputs. And we will call these inputs item and amount. So when we call add item, we can let it know which item do we want to add and how much of that item. So the input will be our BP inventory item master class reference, and the amount will be an integer. Let's make a local variable for both of these. So drag off, promote to local variable, and we'll call this local item. And same thing with the amount, promote to local variable, and we'll call this local amount. Since these variables are local, we can't call them anywhere except inside this function. Double click here to create a reroute node, just to clean it up slightly. So before we add an item, we have to know how much of this item can fit in one stack. Can you only have one in an inventory slot, or can you have up to, say, 16 in one inventory slot? To set this per item, we'll have to add it to our struct. So let's go to blueprints, structs, item data, and we will add a variable, and we'll call this max stack amount, and this will be an integer. Save. Once we add an integer, or any variable, I mean, to the struct, if we want to set it in our inventory items, which we added in blueprints actors inventory. We have these inventory items. First, we have to open the master, and we have to compile it. And then we can open all the children, and we can set that amount. So for flashlight battery, let's say we can have a max stack amount of 8. Cool, so let's go back into our BPC inventory. And we want to set another local variable. We can create another one. We'll call it local max stack amount. This will be of type integer, and we don't want it in an array, so we'll just click here and make it a single variable. Compile and save. Let's set that right here. And to get the amount based off our item, we can get our local item, and we will get the class defaults. And here in the class defaults, if we go back to our inventory item, I can show you, if we click on the self right here, we have these defaults, and that's where we added our variables. It's essentially the same thing. As you can see, it has all the stuff we already added. So if we get the defaults, it has this one variable. If we add variables, it'll add variables here as well. So we have our item data set, and we can break it, and this gives us all our item data. And we can drag off our max stack amount and plug it in right there. Compile and save. So the order we want to go in when trying to add an item. First, we want to check if we already have flashlight batteries in our inventory. And if we do, we want to check if there's a stack with less than 8. Because if there is, we want to add it to that stack. If there is not, we want to add it. We want to search for an empty stack. And if there's empty stacks, we want to add it to that. If there's no empty stacks, we cannot add it at all. So we have to create a function called check for empty slot. In check for empty slot, we want to create a for each loop with break, and the array is our inventory slots. So let's get our array element, and we'll break it, and we have this item and amount, because in inventory slots, it's of type S inventory items, which is our item and amount for our struct. We just basically want to check if the item is valid. So we'll get is valid class, and we'll create a branch for this, put it in our loop body. We want to create a variable, or local variable here. We'll call it local success, and we'll make it a Boolean. And if we find a slot or the item is not valid, that means it's empty. So it means we succeeded in our thing. So we will set the local success to true. Did find an item in that slot, we will have our local success be false. If it's true though, we want to immediately stop the for loop so it doesn't set it back to false. So we will drag this off, and that's why we got the for each loop with break, and we will plug it into our break. To make this cleaner, we can double click and add reroute nodes to make it more clear of what's going on. So once this is completed, we want to ask if we succeeded or not. So click here, and we'll add an output of type Boolean, and it'll just be success. Plug it into completed, and we will plug in our local success. We also want to know which slot we found that was empty. So we'll have to create another local variable for that. We'll call it local index. This will be of type integer. Compile and save. So if we did find a, if we did successfully find an empty slot, we just want to, we just want to set our local index here, and we can plug it into array index right there and connect that to our reroute node, and then we'll break it. And then we can have another output for index, be of type integer, and we can plug in our local index. So let's go back into our add item now that our check for empty slot is done. So lastly, we just want to make this entire function pure. So if we click on this or this, we can just select this button pure, compile and save, and that just eliminates the need for execution nodes. So if we drag it in somewhere, you can see there's no place to put an execution node in. So in add item, we just want to drag in check for empty slot. So right now we're just checking for an empty slot. We're not going to worry about stacking just yet. So we want to ask if we successfully found an empty slot. So we'll get an if statement, we'll plug it in. And if we did, we just want to set this index as our local index. So we'll promote to local variable and we'll set local index. And we'll put that in on the true. If we didn't succeed, for now we can just add a print string and we'll just say this, we'll call this no free slots. And we want to add an output for our add item called success. And it'll be a Boolean. And we can just put it right here. And it'll be false. If we did succeed, we want to get our inventory slots. Oops. And we want to get a set array element. This way we can set one of these elements at a specific index. And remember, once we start the game, this will not be 0, it'll be 8, or whatever you have for your inventory slots. So we will set the array element. The index we want to set comes from our local index, or we can just do it like that as well. And the item will be our local item. And we'll have to actually make the S inventory items, which is kind of the same as breaking, but the opposite direction. And the item will plug in here, and the amount will plug in for our local amount. Great, and that's all we need to do for now. Let's bring that down a bit. Just doing a tiny bit of organization, and we'll compile and save. So this will actually work in the sense of our inventory actor retaining the information of what item we have at one slot, and we can actually test that out. So before we forget, let's actually add our VPC inventory to our player. So let's open our L1 character, and let's add a component, VPC inventory, compile and save. And let's give us a way to actually pick up items in our world. So let's go to content, blueprints, actors, inventory, and let's make a new folder. We'll call this pickup actors. So these will be the actors we actually place inside the world and pick up. So let's open that up. And let's create a blueprint class actor, and we will call this BP pickup actor, master. We can open that up. We have a lot of things open right now. We can add a static mesh. This will be the mesh that we actually look at when we pick them up, and we'll just add a cube for the master. And then we need a sphere overlap. So create a sphere collision. And let's make the radius something like 100. This cube, I believe, is pretty big. Let's just, yeah, that's huge. So let's change the scale down to like 0.2 maybe. And see how that, yeah, that looks much better in our world. So we need to add two variables in our pickup actor. One will be what item this is, so it'll just be called item, and it will be of type BP master inventory item master class reference, not the pickup actor, that's herself, and amount. And this will be how much this specific pickup actor is holding. We have integer. We also want to make the amount editable. So now we just want to add the ability to pick up the item when we overlap this sphere, which will just be a placeholder way of picking items up. So let's click on the sphere collision, scroll down here, and we want to add on component begin overlap. For the other actor, we want to cast to L1 character. So this way it'll only, after this part, will only trigger if it's our character overlapping with the sphere, not anything else. we want to get our inventory from our character. So get BPC inventory. So we can create a reference to our Blueprint component inventory and access the variables. And we want to call add item, which is the function we created. Plug it in. So now we are adding the item, and that's why we have our item variable and our amount variable. Now, if this was a success, if we did successfully add it to our inventory, we want to destroy the actor, which is ourself. And if it was false, we don't want to destroy the actor because we didn't successfully pick it up. We didn't have the room. So we want to leave the item in the world. So let's make an actual item we can pick up and not just the master item. So let's delete that from our world. And we'll right click and we'll create a child blueprint class. And we'll replace this master with flashlight battery. And we can open that up. For the static mesh, I made a small mesh in Blender that you can feel free to use, and definitely feel free to replace if you'd like. So if you want to import that, we can go into content. We can add a new folder called props, and inside props we can add two folders for both materials and meshes. And in mesh, we can import the battery mesh, which I provided in the resource folder. So let's just open that. We do not want it to be a skeletal mesh. Auto-generate collision is fine. Transform can all stay the same. And we can go ahead and create new materials. And we'll hit import. So it has two materials. It's something very simple. I just whipped up in Blender real quick to kind of look like a battery. So we have something to use other than just a cube. It's definitely something you'll want to replace and not use for a final product. So we can close that and we can move. Let's save these first. And then we can move these to the materials folder that we created in our props folder. Okay. Okay, so let's go back into our pickup actor flashlight battery. Don't go into the master one. And the static mesh, we can just change to the battery. Okay, can't really see it because of the default scene root. It has that sphere, but it's right there. Compile and save. And then for our item, we have to set this to flashlight battery, so it knows that's the one to add. And then the amount by default can just be 1. Okay, compile and save. So if we place it into our world, let's go into blueprints, actors, inventory, pickup actors, flashlight. You can see we made the amount variable editable, so we can actually change how many batteries this specific pickup actor will hold. Let's leave it at 1 for now. Now we can see the battery over there. I'm just realizing now it is tiny, and I'm not sure why. Oh, I remember why. It's because our master pickup actor, if we go to review part, I changed this cube to be 0.2, which makes this also 0.2. Since I don't want to have to remember to change this to 1 each time, I'm just going to change this static mesh back to 1. It will be huge, but we're not ever putting the master item into the world, so we don't have to worry about it. So back in here, the battery should be full-sized. And in the worlds, yeah, battery is full-sized. So if we overlap with the invisible sphere around it, it should be able to add it to our inventory because our inventory is completely empty. So if we go over, nothing happened. Let me figure out why. Okay, I've figured out our problem. It's because if we go into the Blueprint component inventory and we have this return node success, I forgot to add it on the true node where it actually adds it. So let's copy the return node and paste another one right here. And this one we want the success to be true. Then we compile and save. So it actually was adding the item to our inventory, but if we go into our master item, we only destroy the actor if the success was true. So we never set the success to be true, so it just stopped right here, and it didn't know to destroy the actor. But it did technically add our item. But now it'll look more the part because when we walk over our battery, it'll be destroyed. Now it is technically in our inventory now. Our BPC inventory knows that it added it to the first empty slot it found, which is our first slot. We have not set it to our widget, so we don't see anything here. These are not correlated at the moment, it's just design. But we have no way to see our inventory, so we can see this with a debug, and then we'll wrap this episode up because it's getting a little long. So in our L1 character, in our debug section here, we can just add a input 1, so when we hit the 1 key, we just want to get our BPC inventory, and we want to get our inventory slots variable. And we'll just get a for each loop for all of them. And in the loop body, we just want to print a string. And we can break this. And we just want to know which item is where and how much. So we want to, if the item is valid, we want to get a select from the string with the it's valid in the index. If it is not valid, we will just say no item, and if it is valid, we want to get both the item and the amount. And we can do that with an append node, which can add multiple things. First, we want to plug in the item, which will get the display name. And then we just want to create a colon and a space. And then we can add another pin, and it'll just be the amount. So let's compile and save. So if we go in and we press 1, we have 8 no items, which correlate to these 8 as well. They're all empty. No items. Now if we go here and add this item, remember it adds a flashlight battery, and the amount is 1. So on the very first index, which will be at the bottom, because it goes bottom to top, we can see if we hit 1, it says BP inventory item flashlight battery 1. I'll hit it again so you can see. So now our inventory actually knows and remembers where our items are in the inventory. And we can actually change the amount. So say this battery is actually equivalent to adding 4 batteries to our inventory. We go over. And if we hit 1, if you look at the end, it now says 4 instead of 1. Great. Now we don't have any way for it, obviously, to add more to stacks. So if we were to like duplicate this and have this one be like 3, it will always find the next empty stack. So if we pick up this, oops, I hit escape instead of 1. If we pick up this first one and hit 1, we have added 4 batteries, and we pick this one. See, it takes up the next 2 slots. They don't add them together. It also doesn't account for our max stack amount yet, which is 8. So if we put this something above 8, like 10, it'll still just add 10 to our inventory slot. See how it says 10. So we have some work to do, but we've made some huge steps in this episode. Hopefully we were able to keep up, and I'm excited to expand on it in the next one.